You're lost." The words hit the room like a gavel, sharp enough to cut through the hum of polite conversation. A white-haired manager in a fitted blue suit jabbed his finger forward, voice echoing across the marble floor. His silver cufflinks flashed under the lights as though they carried authority, but his tone carried something else. Disdain. Beside him, a blonde woman in diamonds clutched her chest in theatrical laughter, her voice dripping with mockery. They weren't whispering, they weren't hiding. They wanted everyone to hear. All eyes turned, and there she was, a black woman in a fitted blue dress, standing calm. No designer logos, no entourage, no desperate pleading, just her, one hand resting against her bag, the other holding a phone she hadn't even unlocked. Her silence unsettled them more than any raised voice could. The manager stepped closer, his voice rising. "This showroom is not for you. Don't waste our time." The blonde woman laughed again, tilting her head back like cruelty was champagne on her tongue. Phones clicked in the background. Some staff smirked. Some customers exchanged uneasy glances. One junior salesman, half hidden behind a row of Ferraris, lifted his phone and pressed record. He had seen enough to know something ugly was unfolding. But she didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply looked at the man, pointing in her face, calm eyes, unshaken breath. The insult was meant to shrink her, to erase her presence in this temple of glass and steel. Instead, it only made the room feel smaller, as though the weight of his arrogance had already overplayed its hand. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her, because in less than a few minutes, the woman they mocked, dismissed, and humiliated would reveal something none of them could imagine. And when she did, this entire showroom, the chandeliers, the cars, the laughter would no longer belong to them. It would belong to her. The room didn't see her for who she was. They saw what they wanted, a stranger out of place. She stood in that blue dress, simple, elegant, but not the kind of uniform this showroom respected. No designer logo screamed her worth. No assistant rushed ahead to announce her name. She carried herself without the trappings they thought proved success. And for them, that was enough to dismiss her. The white-haired manager shook his head with smug certainty. His voice dropped to a scolding tone reserved for children. "This is a showroom for serious buyers, people who actually belong here." The blonde woman chimed in, still laughing as if cruelty were her accessory. "Honestly, look at her. She probably wandered in from the mall." Her pearls shimmered, her smile sharpened. A ripple of laughter broke out among a few onlookers. Not loud, but enough to sting. Phones lit up in hands, screens angled just so. A junior staffer in the corner muttered under his breath, "This isn't right," but he didn't step forward yet. The black woman didn't react. No frown, no flinch. She shifted her phone from one hand to the other and let the silence do the work. Her calm was unnerving, as if she had already measured the weight of their words and found them too light to matter. Still, the insults pressed on. The manager folded his arms, blocking her view of the cars like a gatekeeper. "Why don't you take a look somewhere else? Economy cars are down the street." The blonde smirked, adding with mock pity, "Sweetheart, this floor is way out of your range." Her eyes lifted to meet theirs. Calm, direct, not angry, something sharper. "I know exactly where I am." The words weren't loud, but they landed heavy. They didn't bend, they didn't ask, they stated. And the room went quiet for a beat too long. A silence thick enough to reveal its own discomfort. A man by the entrance whispered to his wife, "She's not backing down." Another staffer behind the desk typed nervously, glancing up as if to measure the risk of choosing sides. For a moment, the air seemed to shift, not enough to change the tide, but enough for those paying attention to sense it. This wasn't going to end the way the manager thought. But arrogance doesn't notice warning signs. It doubles down. And in that gleaming hall of glass and steel, the people who mocked her were about to write their own downfall, one insult at a time. The pause after her words didn't cool the fire. It fanned it. The white-haired manager leaned in, lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Cute line," he said, voice dripping condescension. "But let me make this simple. You're not our clientele. And if you don't leave right now, I'll have security escort you out." Gasps scattered through the room. Not loud, but audible enough to mark the line he'd just crossed. The blonde woman clapped her hands once, as if she'd been waiting for the performance to continue. "Exactly. Let's not waste more time. She's clearly here to..." What, take pictures? Her laugh rang high and brittle, bouncing off the glass walls like broken glass. Behind them, a younger salesman chuckled nervously, trying to mirror his boss. Yeah, no offense, ma'am, but this place is serious business. Cars here cost more than houses. It's not a gallery. His eyes darted toward the blonde woman, desperate for approval. The black woman stayed anchored, unshaken. One hand at her side, one hand still holding her phone, her breath even, her gaze level, but they didn't see composure. They mistook it for weakness. The manager reached for the small card folder in her hand, the one she'd carried in quietly, no theatrics, no fuss. Before she could shift, he snatched it away with a swift, practiced motion, holding it up like a trophy. Let's see what scam we've got here. He flipped it open, scoffed without reading. Fake, just like I thought. M? The blonde leaned forward to peek, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light. Of course it's fake. Look at her. Does she look like someone who belongs in a luxury showroom? She let the words hang heavy, making sure the crowd heard every poisoned syllable. Someone near the back whispered, "That's too far." Another voice, younger, female, muttered, "This doesn't feel right." But the ringleaders pressed on, louder now, feeding off each other. The manager raised his voice so the entire hall could hear. "We deal with real buyers, not people who wander in off the street waving knockoff cards. You're embarrassing yourself. And if you don't walk out, we will call the police." The blonde tilted her head, smile sharp as glass. "Honestly, I almost feel sorry for her. Almost." Phones were out now, not hidden, raised openly, recording every word. The hum of quiet filming was like static building in the air. And through it all, she stood still. She didn't shout. She didn't snatch the card back. She let them write their own indictment, one insult at a time. Because she knew something they didn't. Something that would turn this showroom upside down in a matter of minutes. The room waited for her to break. Every insult had been designed for that moment, for her voice to rise, for her dignity to crack, for her to lash out so they could point and say, "See? She doesn't belong." But she didn't give them that satisfaction. She didn't even move when the manager waved her card folder like evidence in a trial. She simply straightened her posture, adjusted the strap of her bag, and let the silence stretch until it became heavier than their word. Finally, she spoke. "I know exactly what I carry, and I know exactly where I stand." Her tone was low, steady like a line drawn in marble. The blonde blinked, thrown off by the absence of outrage. "Excuse me? That's all you've got?" She laughed again, but softer now, a laugh searching for an audience that was beginning to drift away. The manager scoffed, louder, trying to pull the room back under his control. "Ma'am, this attitude won't get you anywhere. You don't belong here." The black woman tilted her head slightly, not defiant, not submissive, just measured. "And yet," she said, "I am still here." The words landed like stone dropped in still water. Ripples moved outward through the staff, the customers, the phones recording quietly from the corners. A man near the display SUV muttered, "She's not wrong." A woman by the desk whispered to her friend, "She hasn't raised her voice once." But the manager didn't hear those murmurs. He was too busy building his own collapse. "Security's coming," he announced, puffing his chest, holding the card folder aloft like a weapon. "One way or another, you're leaving." She shifted her phone from one hand to the other, eyes never leaving his, calm, focused. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, voice almost serene, "not until you finish showing everyone who you truly are." The room tensed, sensing the trap they hadn't realized they'd walked into. The blonde's laughter faltered. The younger salesman's smirk slipped. Even the junior staffer with the phone lowered it for a second, stunned by the weight of her words. She had flipped the dynamic without raising a hand, without raising a pitch. By refusing to fight on their terms, she had forced the entire showroom onto hers. And in that stillness, in that refusal to break, she was no longer the outsider they mocked. She was the center of gravity, pulling every eye, every lens, every whisper toward her. The silence wasn't weakness. It was power. And soon, it would be undeniable. The air shifted. Her calm refusal had unsettled the very stage they'd tried to build. And that's when the witnesses woke up. A young salesman barely in his 20s, tie slightly crooked, already had his phone out, screen glowing as he recorded from behind a polished Ferrari. He whispered into the mic almost to himself, "This is getting out of hand." Two customers by the entrance, tourists judging by their matching shopping bags, exchanged a glance. The woman lifted her phone high, angling for a better shot. The man muttered, "People need to see this," before hitting the record button. The blonde woman noticed. Her smile faltered. She hissed toward them, "Put that away. This is private property." But the phone stayed up. If anything, more appeared silent lights in the crowd, capturing every insult, every gesture, every sneer. The manager, still clutching the stolen folder, puffed himself up. "Go ahead. Film it. Everyone will see a fraud trying to pose as a buyer." His voice was confident, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else, awareness. Awareness that once cameras entered, control shifted. A man in a gray blazer, leaning against a silver SUV, raised his phone too. He spoke just loud enough for the room. "If this is how you treat guests, the world should know." His words carried, bouncing off the glass walls, heavier than the laughter that had filled the room minutes ago. The black woman remained silent. She hadn't asked anyone to record. She hadn't gestured for help. And yet, without a word, witnesses had become her allies. Every phone lifted was a shield. Every whisper of disapproval was a fracture in the arrogance around her. The blonde tried again, louder this time, voice tight with panic. "You don't understand. She's not supposed to be here." Her words sounded thinner now, like a thread fraying under too much pull. The young salesman behind the Ferrari muttered again, this time louder. "Looks like she belongs here more than you." His voice caught on another phone's mic, spreading beyond the showroom. The manager slammed the folder shut, rattling the air. "Enough. Security will settle this." But the words no longer rang with authority. They sounded desperate, brittle, like a bluff everyone had already called. Meanwhile, the crowd grew bolder. A middle-aged woman whispered, "She hasn't raised her voice once." Another man replied, "That's power, real power." And all she did was stand, still, silent, anchored. The room was no longer just a showroom. It was a stage, and with every passing second, more witnesses pressed record, turning arrogance into evidence, cruelty into broadcast. They thought they were humiliating her, but they were documenting their own undoing. The manager wasn't finished. If anything, the sight of raised phones only sharpened his cruelty. He slammed the folder against the counter, loud enough to echo across the hall. "You hear that?" he barked, eyes sweeping the crowd. "This woman doesn't belong here. She's wasting our time. She's wasting your time." The blonde, sensing the cameras, straightened her pearls and delivered her lines as though auditioning for a role. "Honestly, it's embarrassing. Luxury spaces like this shouldn't be polluted with distractions." Her smirk cut toward the black woman, sharp as glass. A few nervous laughs broke out from staff who didn't dare oppose their boss. But it was thinner now, fragile, the kind of laughter that dies in people's throats before it finds the air. The black woman remained unmoved, one hand on her phone, one hand steady by her side. Stillness was her weapon. But arrogance, blind and brittle, doubled down. The manager stepped around the counter, closing the distance. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor like a drumbeat of authority. He held the folder inches from her face. "Fake, just like I said. We see this all the time, people who think they can sneak into places meant for real clients. Not today." He turned toward the staff lined along the wall. "Get security, now." The blonde let out a theatrical sigh, loud enough for the recordings to catch. "Darling, listen to me. If you leave quietly, maybe no one will remember this. Maybe you won't go viral for all the wrong reasons." Her tone dripped with false kindness, sugar-coating a venom that every witness could taste. But the witnesses weren't fooled. A man near the entrance shook his head. "She's not the one embarrassing herself." His phone caught every second, every sneer. The manager's voice rose, desperate now. "This is a place for serious buyers, people with class, people with money, people who look the part. You don't fit, and you never will." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher. What might have once been said in hushed corners was now shouted into the open, captured, time-stamped, undeniable. And still, she didn't move, didn't break. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, eyes calm as a tide. Every insult he hurled was a brick in the wall he was building around himself, and soon, that wall would collapse. The blonde tried one more barb, voice shrill, mask cracking. "You're lucky we don't call the police right this second. Fraud is a crime, sweetheart, and so is trespassing." But her voice didn't sound victorious anymore. It sounded nervous. Thin. A thread pulled too tight. And all the while, phones captured everything. Not just words, history. Because in this showroom, under blazing chandeliers and polished chrome, humiliation was no longer hers to carry. It was theirs, etched in recordings, sealed by their own arrogance, and she hadn't even raised her voice. Not once. The tension had thickened to the point of breaking glass. Every camera was raised. Every whisper was recorded. Yet the manager pushed further, convinced dominance would shield him from consequence. He gripped the folder tighter, veins bulging on the back of his hand. Then, with a deliberate snap, he yanked the card from inside and held it high like stolen treasure. "See this? Company property now. You're not getting it back until the bank verifies it." Gasps ricocheted through the showroom. "That's theft," someone said aloud. "She gave you her ID," another added, voice trembling with disbelief. But the manager smirked, basking in his own arrogance. "Frauds don't deserve courtesy. She'll be out of here before sundown." The blonde clapped once, brittle as broken crystal. "Finally, some action. Get her out before this circus gets worse." Emma. Her words barely finished when the manager crossed a line that would change everything. He stepped closer, too close, and jabbed his finger at her shoulder. Not a push. Not yet. But an invasion of space meant to humiliate, to reduce her to nothing. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Phone zooming closer. "You can't do that," a man near the entrance barked. A younger woman raised her phone higher. "I'm posting this now." Through it all, she remained still, silent, anchored, her breathing steady, her gaze unflinching. She looked at him, the card still pinched between his fingers, and said calmly, "You just made the worst mistake of your professional life." The words were not shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed like iron, sinking deep into the silence that followed. The manager blinked, stunned for the briefest moment before covering it with a scoff. "Oh, really? And what exactly are you going to do about it?" But even as he said it, his voice cracked just enough for the cameras to catch. Just enough for the crowd to hear fear bleeding into arrogance. The blonde shifted uneasily. The junior salesman lowered his smirk, realizing the tide was shifting. And the witnesses? They didn't just record now. They leaned forward, sensing that history was about to pivot in front of them. Because a breaking point is not just when pressure overwhelms, it's when power reveals itself. And in that showroom, under the weight of stolen dignity and public humiliation, power was about to change hands. The manager's laugh still echoed, brittle and forced, when she moved. Not rushed, not frantic, just a single, measured gesture, her thumb sliding across the screen of her phone. No raised voice, no sudden outburst, just one tap. Somewhere, far beyond the showroom's chandeliers, another phone vibrated. A connection clicked alive. A calm, professional voice answered instantly. "Yes, ma'am, we're ready." The crowd didn't hear both sides of the call, but they saw the way she nodded, subtle, certain. They saw the manager's smirk falter, even if only for a second, when he realized her silence wasn't submission. It was preparation. She didn't reach for the stolen card. She didn't beg him to return it. She simply looked at him and said, "Bring up the contract." The blonde blinked, confused. "What contract?" she demanded, her laugh ringing hollow this time. The woman didn't answer her. She didn't need to, because silence was no longer empty, it was heavy, loaded, alive with something larger than this room. The junior salesman, still recording from behind the Ferrari, whispered into his mic, "She called someone. She's not even flustered." The man in the gray blazer by the SUV leaned toward his own phone, narrating quietly for the stream. "She's calm. Too calm. Something's about to flip." The manager waved the card again, desperate to reclaim the stage. "You hear that? Contracts? Ridiculous. She thinks she can bluff her way into respect." He turned toward the staff, rallying them with a sneer. "Don't buy it. This is all an act." But even as he said it, the ground beneath him was shifting. The murmurs grew louder, the witnesses steadier, the phones higher. And she? She remained anchored. Her gaze never wavered. Her voice never rose. Only the faintest smile touched her lips when she spoke again, every syllable deliberate. "You thought silence meant weakness, but silence is where power lives." The line cut through the room like a blade, sharp, precise, unforgettable. The blonde lowered her arms, her laughter dead. The junior salesman swallowed hard. Even the manager blinked, caught for the first time in the gravity of her calm. And all she had done was tap a phone, one silent counter. But in that single act, she had taken back control. Because when the storm finally broke, it wouldn't come from his shouting. It would come from her silence. The silence after her words, stretched long enough to rattle even the boldest smirk. Phones stayed raised. Eyes stayed locked. The balance had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The manager tried to recover, clutching the stolen card like a shield. Big words, he sneered. But you're nothing here. No title, no money, no place. That's when she stepped forward, just once. A small, controlled step that made the air seem tighter, the marble floor heavier. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't reach for the card. She just looked at him, calm as stone, and spoke. You just mocked the woman who signed a $6 billion deal last week. The room froze. The blonde's lips parted, ready to laugh, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to the crowd, desperate for support that no longer existed. The junior salesman nearly dropped his phone, whispering into the mic. Wait, what did she just say? The man in the gray blazer straightened, eyes narrowing. 6 billion? He repeated aloud, as if saying it would confirm the magnitude. Murmurs rippled like aftershocks across the hall. The manager's chuckle faltered. Ridiculous. Bluff. If you had that kind of power, you wouldn't be standing here alone in some... She cut him off, not with volume, but with precision. I stand alone because I don't need anyone to prove I belong. Not to you. Not to anyone. Her voice sliced clean through the air. Undeniable. Unshakable. The blonde tried one more jab, her mask crumbling. If that were true, you'd have proof papers, contracts, something. But the woman tilted her phone slightly, enough for the screen to glow against her palm. A quiet confirmation tone pulsed once. On the other end, her assistant's voice carried faintly. Documents queued. Ready when you are. She didn't even look down. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed locked on the man in front of her. Proof? She said softly, almost amused. It's already in motion. The weight of her calm confidence hit harder than any signature could. The crowd didn't need to see papers. They saw something stronger the way arrogance shrank in the presence of truth. The manager's face flushed, but his voice cracked when he shouted, Lies! All lies! No one believed him. Not anymore. And in that charged silence, the story had already begun to turn. What was once mockery was now disbelief. What was once laughter was now fear. And what was once humiliation was now revelation. The reveal had begun, and nothing could stop it. The words hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. 6 billion. They echoed in every corner of the showroom, heavier than the chandeliers overhead. For the first time, the blonde didn't laugh. Her hand fluttered nervously toward her necklace, twisting pearls between her fingers. Her eyes darted toward the manager, silently asking for reassurance he no longer had. The junior salesman, still holding his phone, whispered into the mic, She's not bluffing. Look at her. She's too calm. His voice trembled, and for the first time, his smirk was gone. The man in the gray blazer muttered aloud, If that's true, this whole place is hers already. He wasn't whispering anymore. He wanted the cameras to catch it. The manager's face flushed deep red. He slammed the card folder shut with trembling hands, the crack ringing hollow now. Don't listen to her. This is all an act, all a scam. But his voice betrayed him shrill where it had once been smug, cracking where it had once cut. Behind him, 2 staff members shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. One whispered, What if she's telling the truth? The other replied, Then we're done. And the crowd felt it too. Phones tilted higher. Whispers grew bolder. A woman in heels muttered to her friend, She's not the one on trial here. They are. The blonde tried to rally, stepping forward with a forced smile. Don't be ridiculous. If she were anyone important, she wouldn't be standing here arguing with us. But even as she spoke, her laugh rang hollow, her voice thin. The black woman didn't move, didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than their panic. Then came the crack. The junior salesman lowered his phone and whispered to the blonde, We should back off. She glared at him, hissing, Don't you dare. But the manager's control was gone. His voice, once booming, now trembled. Security! Where is security? He turned in circles, searching the room as though help would materialize. None came. No footsteps, no uniforms, only phones, lenses, witnesses, and that absence said everything. The blonde's smile finally broke. She clutched her pearls tighter, eyes wide. Oh my God, she whispered. What if... But she didn't finish. The showroom no longer believed them. Every insult, every sneer, every arrogant gesture they had been recorded, broadcast, sealed. And now, the ones who once commanded the room stood exposed, shrinking under the very lights they thought protected them. Panic had arrived, and it was theirs alone to carry. The panic swelled like a wave, and she chose that moment to end it. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her phone, not high, not theatrical, just enough for the crowd to see the faint glow across her face. A single tap. On the other end, a voice answered instantly, steady and professional. "Yes, ma'am. Standing by." The manager froze mid-rant. The blonde's smile cracked completely. The junior salesman swallowed hard, his phone now shaking in his hands. She didn't look at them. She spoke into the receiver, calm as a judge delivering a verdict. "Effective immediately, this showroom falls under my ownership. Initiate the transfer protocol." Gasps erupted. Someone in the back shouted, "What did she just say?" Another whispered, "She owns it?" The blonde's pearls slipped from her fingers, clattering softly against her bracelet. "That's impossible," she stammered, voice barely a breath. The manager barked a laugh that rang hollow. "Lies, Bluff! You can't." But before he could finish, a notification ping echoed from the computer at the front desk, another from the sales terminal, then another from the finance office tucked behind the glass partition. One by one, screens blinked. A new banner appeared across each. Ownership, updated. Executive authority, active. The staff nearest the desk recoiled. One whispered, "Her name's on it. It's really her." The manager's laugh died in his throat. He lunged toward the desk, slamming his hand against the keyboard, desperate to undo what was already sealed. The screen refused him, locked out. Access denied. She watched him flail, unshaken. Then she gave her command, her voice level, final. "Security! Escort them out!" Two uniformed guards, who had been silent observers at the edge of the room, finally stepped forward. Their movements were calm, precise, unquestioning. They positioned themselves beside the manager and the blonde, hands open but firm. "You can't do this!" the manager shouted, his voice cracking into panic. "I've worked here 20 years. Her eyes didn't waver. "And in 20 seconds you lost it all." The crowd gasped again, some even clapping softly, their disbelief tipping into awe. Phones captured every angle: his red face, her calm gaze, the guards guiding him toward the door. And through it all, she never raised her voice. Not once. Because true power doesn't shout. It decides. The doors closed behind them with a hollow thud, cutting their protests out of the air. Silence followed, heavy and electric, as if the entire showroom itself was holding its breath. Every camera stayed up. Every witness leaned forward. All eyes fixed on the woman who had just shifted the ground beneath their feet. She didn't gloat. She didn't bask. She simply adjusted the strap of her bag, straightened her shoulders, and turned to face the crowd. Her voice was steady, quiet, yet it carried to every corner of the gleaming hall. Respect should never depend on appearances. She paused, letting the words sink deep into the marble silence. It should not be tied to a suit, or a logo, or a car key. Respect is not a costume you put on. It is the dignity you give or deny. The junior salesman lowered his phone, eyes wide, guilt written on his face. A woman by the desk nodded slowly, whispering to herself, "That's the truth." The CEO's gaze swept the room, not judging, not accusing, but reminding. Today you saw how quickly arrogance collapses when it's recorded, when it's witnessed. But arrogance should not have a stage to begin with. Not here, not anywhere. The chandeliers above seemed dimmer now, as though the light itself bent toward her words. She slipped her phone into her bag and took one final look at the rows of polished cars, the spotless floor, the stunned faces. "This showroom," she said, "belongs to me now. But more than that, it belongs to the principle that no one gets to decide who belongs based on the color of skin or the cut of fabric. That ends today." The crowd stirred soft applause at first, then louder, swelling, filling the room where laughter had once echoed. Some clapped with relief, others with awe, and a few with quiet shame. She didn't bow, she didn't wave, she simply turned and began walking toward the exit, heels clicking against the marble like a clock counting down the end of an era. As she reached the glass doors, a voice called out from the back, "Ma'am, what should we remember from this?" She stopped, turned slightly, and delivered her final words. "Remember this. Silence is not weakness, and dignity does not ask for permission." Then she stepped into the daylight, leaving the room forever changed.